Genesis chapter 5. Genesis 5, we've began looking at this, spun off on some other genealogies and the time frame of this. We're going to read through it now. If you allow me, I'll read through very quickly in the NIV, and then we got the notes in the English Standard. And it's basically the genealogy, as you know. It's going to follow a similar pattern. It's going to give the name of the individual. It's going to mention how old they were when they had their first son. It's going to mention how long they lived after their son, give their total years, and then give the name of their son. And we're going to have altogether 10 generations up to Noah. And Methuselah will be that eighth generation who dies the year of the flood, which again matches the eighth generation from Adam of Cain's line that died in the flood, and the eighth generation on the Sumerian king list that died in the flood also. So here it is, chapter 5, verse 1, NIV. This is the written account of Adam's line. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them. And when they were created, he called them man, or Adam. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness. In his own image, he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. Now, do notice this potentially. We assume this is their first child. That may be true, but it is not true with Adam. Adam lived 130 years. He had a son in his own likeness named Seth. Well, we know that he already had Cain and Abel, and probably other sons and daughters during that time period. Potential. As you read this, it could mean they were, Seth lived 105 years and he became the father of Enosh, meaning for 105 he had no children. Or it could mean this was the son they're going to mention and follow the genealogy on up to Noah. We may be tracing Noah's genealogy, which becomes Shem's genealogy, which becomes Abraham's genealogy. And after he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. Every one of these guys dies, meaning they're not going to get a good run. You almost get to 1,000 years, but they're not going to make it. No one can make it. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan, and after he became the father of Kenan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enosh lived 905 years, and then he died. Again, you can let those numbers trip you up. They're awful large, they're awful big, but again, this is not the world that we live in. In fact, we refer to the verse in Peter that says, in the end, people are going to think things have gone on as they always have, that there's never been a change. Peter's pointing out there have been ages. Things change. God intervenes. And the second coming, things are going to continue, but when the second coming occurs, which Peter's talking about, there's going to be a change. We're going to continue to live, but the life after the second coming is going to be different than life before the second coming, and things do not go the same. They change. Well, here, there was a garden of paradise. Man sinned, things changed. Man is living now. The flood's going to come and things are going to change. The Tower of Babel, things are going to change. Christ will come. Things will change. And so things are not always as they have been. You can't run science like everything's the same, because God, the spiritual being that created all this, intervenes and adjusts. And so there's no reason to doubt these years. I mean, there's reason to wonder about them. But this is a different age, a different culture. And as you know, when the flood takes place, these ages cut in half. Something happens at the flood that prevents man from living this many years. Verse 12, when Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. And after he became the father of Mahalalel, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Kenan lived 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. And after he became the father of Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Mahalalel lived 895 years, and then he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. And after he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived 962 years, and then he died. And now we have a little bit of an interruption into our pattern, or our sequence, our formula. Verse 21, then Enoch, when Enoch had lived 65 years, again, unique because that's, half the age of most people, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years. Again, does that mean, it says he walked with God 300 years, that he hadn't been walking with God? But that's not clear. And had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch, it says it a second time, walked with God. Then he was no more. He was not. He was nothing, because God took him away. Again, we'll talk about that when we get there. And that's interesting. So it says he lives 365 years. That's the least amount in this genealogy. It is the number of the days of the solar system. Some come into this and wonder if this 365 and the number 6, which the cuneiform language is written or based on, if that has something to do with these years, if that's some kind of a solar cycle. Again, it's just that number matches, and people talk about it. Verse 25. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. And after he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. And of course, you notice everyone's having many sons and daughters. And I say many because they're living 800-900 years. And so if they have other sons and daughters, it's probably not 2 or 3. It's probably 100, 200. I don't know, figure it out. Although altogether Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died. Even the man who lives the longest, Methuselah, ends up dying. Interesting, the man who lived the shortest, Enoch, has a son that lives the longest. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah. And now we get at the first, you can go back in the Hebrew and find meanings of these names and what they represent. But this is the only father who explains why he named his son the name he did. He will comfort us. He named him Noah and said, he will comfort us in the labor and the painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. We'll talk about that when we get there, but 3 things are says. The Lord has cursed the ground. It's painful labor or toil, and it is it's work, it's painful toil, and it's from a land that has been cursed. And there's going to be some kind of comfort. Now we'll talk about what kind of comfort. Is this a prophecy? Is this a prayer, a request? Is this just, a statement of fact? After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And that's the end of the chapter. In chapter 6, verse 1, begins to talk about the age of the flood. This genealogy that ends here is going to pick up later in chapter 9 with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And again, as I mentioned before, were they triplets, Shem, Ham, and Japheth? They're all mentioned the same year. But we find out that Shem was 100 years old 2 years after the flood. So Ham appears to be 2 years older than Shem, and we just say Japheth is 2 years younger than Shem. So those are the rough reading right there. Going to the notes. We looked at the first 2 verses already in the notes, but here it is again, chapter 5, verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. And right there in the Hebrew, I've got it in a square, the word book. It means sefer. It means a missive, a document, a writing, a book. It comes from the word that means to scrape something flat, possibly scraping off a writing surface to record. So, again, amazing. You've got Adam potentially writing in the garden with writing equipment. It's like, how can that be? Well, because he's not a descendant of the monkeys. He's created by God. Adam already is speaking. They've got language. So again, you've got to reframe your mind. God made Adam as a functioning human. He wasn't an infant descended from monkeys, crawling in the dirt. He was created in the image of God. He could speak. He was an adult. He could talk to his wife. He could talk with God. He had fellowship with God. Yeah, but he probably couldn't write. Why couldn't he write? It's within the very framework of man's nature. And so if you think about it biblically, that's not a problem. But it means book, and it's genealogy, it's the Toledot, it's the account, it's the storyline, it's the generations, and it's going to appear several places as if they're written Toledots, written documents that are going to be put together in the book of Genesis. Genesis 5, verse 2. Male and female, he created them and blessed them and named them man when they were created. Again, he made just two of them, one male, one female. They're both man, but just like, for reproduction, if it be plants, if it be animals, there's a male and a female. Again, some very basic things that have never been questioned in the history or recent history of mankind until now in our modern age of naturalism, evolution, and the decaying process of a culture. We struggle with the male and female concept. Then I've got, coming down there, beginning in verse 3, 5:3 at the bottom of the page, it says Adam, then the number 1 in parentheses, and I went ahead and put the dates on as we've talked about. You don't have to accept the dates. You should accept the text of Scripture. You don't have to accept my BC dates. But I did write number 1 for Adam because he's first, and if you turn the page, we'll come back to this in just a moment. Every individual in that genealogy, like Seth is 2, Enosh is 3. Before we get to the verse, I just put their name, the number of the genealogy, the year they were born, and the year they died. You can get the year, how old they were when they died, in the text of Scripture. And, of course, you can see what I'm adding. But I do have the numbers, and you can see Enoch was number 7, Noah was number 10 in the generations there. But going back to page 1, chapter 5, verse 3, when Adam had lived 130 years, again, he's already had Cain and Abel, and Cain has already married somebody because he went away with his family. So he must have had at least one daughter. Again, that's strange. That's weird. Right, that's weird in 2024 AD, but it's not strange in another age before the time of Israel, before the Tower of Babel, before the flood, and only one generation out of the Garden of Eden. It's a different age. So you can't apply all the natural things to them and expect it to be exactly the same. He fathered a son in his own likeness after his image and named him Seth. And again, in his image, that kind of people tie into that. The sin nature of man is now handed down. We've already seen it manifested with Cain and Abel, but Adam was made in the image of God, so he's handing down the image of God, but he's also handing down the image of fallen man, and that's why all these men die. They're made in the image of God, and we still hold that true today as Christians. Mankind, every man, every individual human has the stamp of God. We are made in God's image. The animals were created by God, but not in his image. Man is created in his image, so every man is in the image of God. That's why man needs to be honored and respected as a created being. But every man also is in the image of Adam with a now sin nature, which again requires salvation, and they're heading for death. So you have that combination of the image of God and the image of man, and then you see all the things that, again, without running down an entire road here, that man can do that is amazing, from languages to building to medicine to music and playing instruments and doing art, of solving problems, of creating and developing science and thinking and reasoning through science. All of that is part of the image of God. But understand, anything that man can do, God himself could do it in a much higher level. But nonetheless, that is the image of God. Now, a little bit about population here. I just put this in because I find it interesting. The population of the earth at this time is going to be population is going to be great. How many people are there? Well, here's some things. I've got the resources listed here on the PDF notes online. You can just click on these and they'll open up. Here's something from What Was the Population of Earth Before the Flood? And there's the link. I quote right from it. How many people could have been born in 1,656 years? And 1,656 years, that's the number from creation until the flood. That's the same number of Methuselah's age plus the time there. It matches perfectly. So there's 1,656 years. How many people could have been created or produced in that time? It says here, if we simply use the population growth percentage of recent years in a modern world, which is 1.13% population growth rate in 2016, that would give us an Earth population of around 241 million. 241,000,000. That's how many, is that right? 241 million within this many years using our current, again, things, like we said before, things have not always been the same. Things are different in different ages. When Christ comes back, life will continue, but it's going to be definitely different. In the Garden of Eden, life was perfect, and then when man fell, it changed. The flood came, it changed. So if we just used our population growth percentage in 1,656 years, 2 people would produce this many people. But it's not the 21st or the 20th century. It's right out of Eden. And so that's what they go on and say. And that would give us the population of 241 million at the time of Noah. However, it says, given the fact that the average age was much higher, I mean, if we live to be 100 years old, that's big news. These guys, no one lives only 100 years. They're living 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 years. So they're going to produce more sons and daughters. And they're not dying. I mean, if we have 1,656 years, we got people dying, a generation getting wiped out every, if you want to say 40 years or 70 years, they're falling away. These guys just aren't dying. I mean, you've got Adam living on top of, when did I say Adam died? I've got the wrong number here. Around 3000 BC. He's going to live up until the time of Methuselah. He's going to see these generations. So people aren't dying. Well, so with that, given the fact that the Earth's population, however, given the fact that the average age was much higher and environmental conditions were much more stable and conducive to life, it seems that a higher rate of population growth would be expected. If we increase the rate even by the tiniest amount from 1.13 to simply 1.3, you're going from 1.13 to 1.3% population growth, a small fraction of a difference. It says that would arrive at a population of around 3.9 billion. Now, we have on the earth today 8 billion people. And that has, well, I'll show you some numbers, that just accelerated in the last century and a half. But this is potential. Somewhere between the first number and 3.9 billion people is how many people are going to be on the earth at the flood of Noah. Just doing the math. And then it goes on in this article, says, however, it is much more likely that the population increase would have been far greater than this 1.3. They're just giving you a safe number. Point B, population doubles every 150 years. Now here's another way of getting around these numbers, or getting to these numbers. Every 150 years, population doubles. So if you've got 2 people, 150 years later, you got 4 people. 150 years later, you got 8 people. Again, it's going to not work like that in the garden, coming out of the garden, but here it is. Therefore, after 150 years, there would be 4 people. After another 150 years, there would be 8 people. After another 150 years, there would be 16 people, and so on. It should be noted that the growth rate is actually very, very conservative. In reality, even with disease, famines, and natural disasters, the world population currently doubles every 40 years or so. And after 32, so it's not 150 years, it's more like doubling every in reality, today, it's doubling every 40 years. So if you consider 8 billion people today, figure 40 years, and you'll see see where we were. After 32 doublings, which is only 4,800 years, the world population would have reached 8.6 billion years, or 8.6 billion population. Today's world population is 8 billion. That's point C. Point D, population growth from 1 billion people in 1800. Look at that. 1800, 1 billion people. Today, 8 billion. So between 1800 to 2024, you went from 1 billion to 8 billion. And that's in our time. That's with disease, wars, everything that's taken place, and people dying at the ages that they die. There's also a little box right there, point E. If you click on that link, there's a world population clock, and you can just watch it climb. It's at 8 billion, and just the numbers are just going up as you watch. It's like, it's freaky. But nonetheless, that gives you an idea of when we talk about how many people were on the earth from Adam. It says had other sons and daughters. We're not talking about 20 people. By the time of the flood, 1,600 years, there could be more than a million, pushing a billion or so. Okay, chapter 5, verse 4 on page 2. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years. I mean, you see, he's living all those years, so the population is not decreasing because of Adam. And he had other sons and daughters. Thus the days of Adam were 930 years. Seth, I don't have much to say about these guys. You can see they're all written there, but I've got them written down. 2 was Seth, 3 was Enosh, 4 was Kenan, 5 was Mahalalel, 6 was Jared. I've added the dates there that you can see when they would have lived if we're following this as a accurate recording. And again, I seem to think it was, but all of those guys are having other sons and daughters. We're on page 3 already. When Jared had lived 162 years, he fathered Enoch. Jared lived after he fathered Enoch 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Here comes Enoch. Enoch appears to have been born in the year 3492 and died in the year 3127. I'll say this about evolution and population. See, we're working with the concept generally that the earth is 6,000 years old. Now, there's another whole study that if the flood takes place when we've got it taking place, say roughly 2500 BC, you're going to wipe out all those people between Adam and Noah are going to be wiped out. All the people are gone, and you have to start over with your growth chart. Study after study, and you can look this up online. I've got books that have researched this, Creation Institute, Genesis is history, other ministries that are focused on this. It is possible to start with 8 people after the flood, and if you do the multiplication with all the formulas, you would be right at 8 billion people today with the growth chart. And it's like to go from 8 people with the biblical date of the flood to 8 billion people is exactly the model that follows. The problem is evolution. If they have 50 million years, let's just say 50,000 years. You understand the difference between 50,000 years? The biblical model of a 6,000-year-old earth with a flood taking place around 2500 BC works. It's real. But if you put 50,000 years and man's been here, it's like I read an article, there should be like, I don't have it here. I didn't bother to keep it in the notes. But understand how much more exponentially it's going to go up. There would be like 175 people per square inch on the earth if evolution is true, and you put it in a realistic population model like we're working with here, like we have the clock working in 1800 at 1 billion people, 2420's got 8 billion people. If the earth the man has been here this long, and there was no worldwide flood like they say, it was just, the Euphrates overflowed its banks. It's something like, again, I don't know the number, maybe 125 people per square inch on the surface of the earth, which of course is very crowded. And I think at that point you'd have to be concerned with global warming and some other things. But anyway, that's something you can look at. And that's what evolutionists don't want to do, that kind of a math problem. The biblical, it matches. Chapter 5, verse 21, verses 21 through 24. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. And again, his name means something to the effect of when he dies, it falls. Or when he goes, it comes. Something to this effect. It seems to be a date. It seems to be a prophetic name. Enoch walked with God, and that's going to be an important topic right here for a moment. He walked with God. Now notice, it doesn't say that about any of these other guys. As a Sunday school student, when you talk about Adam's genealogy, like Adam and Seth and Kenan and Mahalalel, these are all good, godly men because their names are in the Bible. But see, if you know the Bible, that's a fallacy, because the Bible has lists. They'll give you a genealogy. They'll go through all the kings, and a good portion of the kings are wicked. They're idolaters. You go through the people in Israel that came out of Israel. They followed Moses. They weren't Yahweh worshipers. Moses was trying to convert them. He was trying to bring them out of idolatry. How do we know he had to bring them out of idolatry? Because after he goes up on the mountain, what's the first thing they do? They go back to idolatry. They didn't learn idolatry at the base of Mount Sinai. They brought it with them. Jacob, you can see that. He tells his children, he says, put away your household gods. Get away from these things. So they were all these people were not, in a sense, walking with God. Interesting, the seventh generation is going to say he starts, or it says he's walking with God. Why doesn't it say it about his father? Why does it say it about the others? But it says he walked with God after he fathered Methuselah. So if you read that, it's at some point, if you put that together, the year Methuselah was born, he walked with God. Up until that time, he was just following the generations, just following his forefathers. But at this point, he walked with God the year Methuselah was born. And Methuselah's name seems to mean when he dies, it comes. Seems to be some kind of prophecy, some kind of judgment that has been pronounced. And you don't have to go too far. You just got to turn the page to chapter 6. It says, okay, let's talk about the days that Enoch saw this potential prophecy, saw the coming judgment, gave his son a name, and started walking with God. It all seems to tie together. It's going to come up again here in a moment. After he fathered Methuselah, walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Enoch were 365. Enoch walked with God. It says it a second time. This seems to be the start, the beginning of his turning and walking with God. And then he spent the next 300 years walking with God. He did not turn back. He began walking here when Methuselah was born, possibly because of some divine encounter, and then he continued walking, and he did so, and it says, and he was not, for God took him. Now, there's a whole lot of things in there that are not said. As a Bible teacher, you have to be very careful, because there's the book of 1st Enoch and 2nd Enoch, and Enoch is in those books is going to be taken by God into the heavens, and he's going to be shown all these spiritual things, and it's like that's not here in the text. The issue is going to come up when, well, we'll see it here, when Jude and possibly Peter seem to quote from those books about Enoch. So it's going to be clear. Well, let's just go to point 3. From Jude chapter 1, or Jude 1, the book of Jude has only one chapter, verses 14 and 15. I can say right here, if Methuselah means a timing of the judgment, the prophecy of a judgment, if this was the case when the year that Methuselah was born, if that took place, it looks like it would work. But if we go to Jude Verse 14 and 15, Jude, the brother of Jesus, one of the apostles in the early church, he writes, it was also about these, and these are false teachers, false prophets, idolaters, people that are turning away from God and leading others away. It was about these, also about these, that Enoch, the seventh from Adam, see, he thinks Enoch is the seventh generation from Adam. I mean, we're in the first century, and Jesus' brother assumes that Enoch is in the seventh generation from Adam. He doesn't think, well, there must have been like several generations that were skipped, or man's been around for 50,000 years or something. He's assuming it's true. The seventh from Adam, Enoch prophesied, saying, and now here's a quote from First Enoch. It's from those. It doesn't mean the whole book is true, but it means this verse, this concept is true, which makes you wonder about what else is going on in First Enoch and what was going on here. But he said this, Enoch said, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones, and these would be angels. This is not the second coming of the saints coming back in a victorious procession back to the earth. This is the angelic. You got to interpret this. You could read this as saints if you wanted to, because it means saints, holy ones, and we're the holy ones, but the angels are the holy ones. So which holy ones, which saints are coming? Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment on all and to convict all the ungodly of their deeds of ungodliness that they have committed in such ungodly way, and of all the harsh things that ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Now, twofold. Jude is talking as if this is going to take place at the second coming, which I think is true. Enoch may have been referring to that. But Enoch also seems to be prophesying of the flood, of that there is, now, he may or may not have known flood, just like we talked, like last night, we talked about from the Garden of Eden, they knew a deliverer was coming that was going to crush the serpent's head. It was going to be the seed of a woman. David knew his son was going to come. Isaiah knew this man would take away the sins. He'd bear the sins of many. But they didn't know it was going to be during the Roman Empire on a cross, and he'd be in a tomb for 3 days. They didn't know the details. They just knew deliverer. They knew salvation, and they trusted in the Lord that there would be hope. Well, Enoch maybe doesn't know it's going to be a flood that's going to wipe out the whole world. Maybe he does. But he knows something about judgment, and it's coming because of all the ungodly people. Think of the population. The population is growing rapidly, and it's becoming more and more wicked. Maybe Enoch broke away from that culture and started following God. Maybe God came and got Enoch and showed him his vision, and he spoke of it, and he continued to walk with God. But clearly, in Jude verses 14 and 15, believes that Enoch prophesied of the judgment. I have no trouble thinking Enoch's prophecy is twofold. That Enoch's prophecy was looking at the flood of Noah, but it was also going to be an ultimate fulfillment at the second coming or at the end of the millennium. And you can see examples of that, like we talked about this somewhere this last couple weeks. But Daniel prophesied the temple would be desecrated. And that happened in 165 at the Maccabean revolt when Antiochus Epiphanes showed up. But Jesus also said it was going to take place just as Daniel spoke of. But it already happened, Jesus. Oh, no, not this one. And then the preterists, and I agree with this part of their interpretation, it was fulfilled again in 70 A.D. when the Romans came in and destroyed the temple, and the temple was desecrated again, a second time. But yet, we're still waiting. Revelation was written in 96 A.D., and the Maccabean revolt and 165 B.C. had taken place. Jerusalem had already fallen in 70 A.D., yet John is writing in 96 A.D. of a future temple that's going to be built and then taken over by the Antichrist and desecrated again. So you've got one prophecy, but it's going to take place 1, 2, 3 times. And so the flood, and Peter ties this together, the flood is a type of a second coming, or at least of judgment coming to wipe it out and start again. Well, that's going to take place again at the second coming. There's going to be judgment and a resetting and a restarting. And so there's no doubt that Enoch could have been talking about the flood. That's the way I think that's why Lamech's going to say what he says, and why Noah is ready to do what he's going to do, because of Enoch telling, it'd be great-grandpa Enoch telling him what to do. But yet, Jude takes that prophecy and says, it's yet coming in the future. Okay, that's one example of, and if you look right there, I've got the two verse, Genesis chapter 5, verse 22, and Genesis chapter 5, verse 24, the Hebrew. And the first word in each of those verses is the word halak in the Hebrew. And it means, it's translated walk. It means to go, to come, to walk. You can see it's in both the beginning of chapter 5, verse 22, verse 24. That's what the word means. But if you look at point 4 on your notes, Enoch 2 times is said to walk with God, which indicates some kind of unity or obedience, that he's in step with God. But if we go to the scriptures, we can find out that the phrase walk with God in the Old Testament has a little more insight. I hope you don't mind. Here we go. Noah also in chapter 6, verse 9 and 10, when we resume the story in chapter 6, it's going to say about Noah that these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so the ideal here of walking has to do with, is going to be some kind of obedience. Here we go. That's Noah. He's blameless, he's righteous in his generation, meaning not everyone was like this. Abraham, chapter 17 of Genesis, verses 1 and 2. When Abraham was 99 years old, now he's been following the Lord for some 3 decades, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty, walk before me. Now what does this walk before me mean? And be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. So just like Noah was blameless, obedient, Abraham is blameless. This is talking about lifestyle. This is not, singing hymns and walking in the cool of the day and the sunset going down. That could be part of it, but the focus is not on sweet, sweet fellowship, swaying back and forth with the lights dimmed down in the sanctuary. This is talking about obedience and blamelessness. This is talking about a lifestyle, not your music. Hezekiah walked before the Lord in 2 Kings 20 and Isaiah 38. It's the same verse, basically. I'll read Isaiah 38:3 on page 4. This is when Hezekiah gets sick, and he's dying. Then Hezekiah turned his face to the wall when he was told that he's going to die. Turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord and says, Please, O Lord, remember how I have walked before you in faithfulness and with my whole heart. He was faithful. His whole heart. His lifestyle was committed to God. We'd throw him in this category of obedient, blameless, faithful, whole heart. He says, I walked before you in faithfulness and with a whole heart, and have done what is good in your sight. Done good. Doesn't say sang choruses over and over again and swayed to the music with my hands in the air. I have actually done good, had my whole heart, been faithful, been blameless, lived in obedience, not just showed up and sang in a dark church somewhere. Point 5, walk is halak. I've got that written down there again. It says in point 5, but this is a word is used at times to indicate the service of a loyal servant to his master, and it would be seen or executed like this, of walking before the master, preparing the way or paving the road. So the servant would walk with his master. He would not walk side by side, hand in hand, looking at the sunset, fellowshipping together. How was your day? How was your day? The servant would walk in front of his master, preparing the way for the master. He's a servant. or standing before the master, ready to receive orders. So it could be walking before, or it could be standing before. What is it that you want me to do? And here we go, a whole list out of Kings from David and Solomon. I'll read a couple of them very quickly, but it's the same idea. God says to David in 1 Kings 2:4, the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons pay close attention to their way, pay close attention to their way, lifestyle, to walk before me in faithfulness with all their heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. If you will maintain a lifestyle of obedience, being blameless before me and faithful, I will continue to use you as my servants. Solomon says, 1 Kings 3:6, you have shown, he's talking to God, you've shown great and steadfast love to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faith. He walked before you. He didn't walk, beside him and with him, holding hands, talking about how beautiful the flowers were. He's walking before him in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart towards you. And you have kept for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on the throne. And it goes on down, some more examples. So that when it talks about he walked with God, or for 300 years he walked with God, that is indicating a lifestyle of faithfulness and obedience to the Lord, like a servant is to his master. And then we go back to those words, look at them again very quickly, go back to page 5. And this starts slipping away from me without getting... See, like right there, I thought I did a nice job. Walk, he walked with God. Okay, what's that mean? Well, they have fellowship. Okay, they get along. They agree with each other. Okay, but I think we got a nice developed list here of what that walk, it means a lifestyle. He was walking in obedience to the Lord. Now, it says right here, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So he walked. We know what walked means right here. At least you know what I'm saying. It means obedience, lifestyle. And then it says he was not. So he's not. And why is he not? Because it says that God took him. He was taken. Sounds like a movie. What's that guy's name? Liam. So he was took. I would say took him. Now, I don't know. I'm pretty confident on this. Not. I can make stuff up. I know what people say, but looking in the text, the word not, was not, it's ayin in the Hebrew, A-Y-I-N, and it means nothing or not. He was nothing. He was not. That's another, those are translations, meaning, he's gone. That's the idea. He's not. Where is he? He's no longer here. We could say no longer physical. Again, I'm adding that. It's like if his body's there dead, this is where it comes from. He's there dead. His soul's gone, but there he is. There's his tomb. There's his monument. There's his grave. But he's gone. He's disappeared. And why? It says because God took him. And the word took, you can see a laka there. It means to take. God took him. So it appears God took him, again, from the physical. He didn't disappear. He's not like gone. Man lives forever. But his physical is not. And he took him somewhere spiritual. Now we got all kinds of things happening. It's spiritual is so he didn't die. It's given unto men once to die and then face the judgment. I don't know. This is where we go to the point 2, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, for some biblical support. By faith, Enoch was taken up. Okay, taken up. Now, it doesn't say that in the Hebrew. It just says he was taken. Hebrew says he was taken up. so that he should not see death. So he did not, see, all these guys, and then they died. They had other sons and daughters, lived 800 more years, and then they died. Enoch had a son at 65, lived another 300 years, didn't die. Now, it doesn't say that in the text. It just says he walked with God. He was not. He's gone. We can't find him. And he was taken by God. Hebrews adds to the idea that God took him up, that he did not die, did not see death, for he was not found. So they did not have a funeral. There's no tomb, there's no grave, there's no body. They couldn't find him. Closest example we've got of this in the Old Testament, of course, is Elijah being taken up. And they go out and look for it, they couldn't find him. Now again, I can't explain that. It's like there's certain, in my theological mind, there's certain violations here. Wait, you can't be just taken. You've got to go through death. Paul says we will not all we will not all die, but we will be changed in the flash, in the twinkling of an eye. But that's the resurrection. Enoch isn't resurrected. You understand the difference. I mean, at the rapture, or whenever that event takes place, we will not die, but we all have to be changed, because the physical, we read it last night, the physical cannot inherit the spiritual. The mortal can't inherit immortality. You have to be changed. So he didn't die, but was he changed? Was this a resurrection? Was this the type of a rapture? And then this is where it's like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'll read more. Because God had taken him. Now before he was taken, this goes back to the walking part, he was commended as having pleased God with the walking part. And without faith, it is impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. So this walking with him right here, in the writer of Hebrews is saying, this was part of faith. He believed God. He believed the message. He believed in God's existence. And he had faith, but that faith produced, of course, really, it makes total sense. If you really believe in Yahweh, if you believe in the Creator, the Judge, the one who is seeing everything, and you really believe that, you're either going to flat out go into rebellion, or you're going to fall on your face in obedience, realizing, man, everything I do, say, think, he is observing. And when you get a perspective on it, nothing else matters except the Lord himself. And so that's kind of what the author is saying. He had faith, which means he lived a lifestyle, and God, he is no more. God took him up. He didn't die, but he's no longer physical. He was translated into this spiritual realm. Now, what happened? Where's that fit? Again, sometimes that's where you throw in, the two witnesses, Enoch and Elijah, that come back. But then you also got Moses, but Moses was there. Now you're into this whole thing, and we just leave that information there, saying, I can't do any more with that than what we've got. I turn the page very quickly, see if we can finish this up. Methuselah, page 4. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Methuselah lived after he had fathered Lamech 782 years, and other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Methuselah were 969 years. Of course, he's the oldest man. His father was the youngest man to be taken. He's the oldest man to live. And his name actually means here, man of the spear, or man of the javelin. And they get with that somehow the idea that when he comes, he falls. Another interpretation of putting those words together. Now then you wonder, what kind of man? Man of the spear, man of the javelin. Okay, Lamech had lived 182 years. He fathered his son, verse 29, and called his name Noah. Boy, don't have time to do this right here. But he says, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. And like I said before, the Lord has cursed the ground. There's relief, or there's looking for relief from work, and there's painful toil. There's three things: a curse, there's work, and painful toil. and he names him Noah. And if you turn the page there, we'll pick this up next week. In the Hebrew, the word Noah means rest, but when it says he will comfort us, that means to console or to be sorry. So Lamech is doing one of three things. Point 3 on page 5. When he names Noah, it is either life is so bitter and harsh that it's a wish, it's a prayer. Lamech is desperate with the condition of mankind in his generation and wants divine help, so he names him. Is this the man? Because the seed of the woman is going to crush the serpent's head. Is this the one? This is the one. It's time. 10th generation, it's time for the deliverer. He's looking for the Christ. This is him. He's going to deliver us from the curse, the labor, the sweat, all this painful. It's miserable. So it's a wish. Or it's a prophecy. Building off of Enoch and Methuselah, Lamech, the grandson, now is saying, this son is going to live to the day where we start this whole thing over. Judgment is coming. The second, we would say it's the second coming, and after the second coming, we start again. I mean, we're not looking for the flood and the judgment and the flood, but we are looking for the second coming and judgment. So what? So we can get on the other side. This is the new generation. And so they're looking at it in an eschatological sense. So he's a prophecy knowing that this is going to be the one. Or a gift. Lamech's words may foresee Noah's work in the vineyard as a producer of grapes and a reward of the wine. Because again, he's going to give him some kind of comfort from the soil. And the first thing he does when he gets off the ark, he plants a vineyard and gives mankind wine. And that may not be just a random verse in the Bible. It may be, this is how God brought judgment, but it's not the end. But when Noah comes off the ark, he is going to be, in a sense, a second Adam. We're going to have a second shot. What Adam's generations failed to do and led him into total chaos, Noah's going to get off the ark. It's like, now we can start again. Remember what we've learned. Let's do it right this time. So we talk about the first Adam and Jesus being the second Adam, which is accurate. With Noah, Noah is in a sense of being a second Adam, a second shot, and Lamech may have been seeing that this is going to be the generation that God brings the judgment, and we have a second shot, and Noah's going to bring us some kind of relief from what happened in the Garden of Eden. They're still living on the burden of the fall in the Garden of Eden. I'll pray, and we are finished. Father, we thank you for the chance to look into your word. We thank you for the things you've recorded and preserved for us. We ask that by the power of your Spirit that we may understand these things and bring them to life in our own lives, that we may walk before you in obedience and please you in the things we think, the things we say, the things we do as we serve you at this time in history. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you again for being here.